everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about the things that you should not do when you're writing your dissertation, and this also applies for your thesis. So if you're also writing your thesis, this will also apply. Do not make these mistakes. In my last video, I spoke about the 6 mistakes that you should not make. So today I am going to cover the remaining mistakes that I thought about when I thought about this issue. What are the common mistakes that people often make when they're writing their dissertation? So the first one here, what I want to talk about today is plagiarism. Do not plagiarize when you are writing your thesis or your dissertation paper. As you know, plagiarism is a very serious offense, and if you do not paraphrase or if you do not name your source for certain information, then you can definitely get in serious trouble. You can get expelled from your program. And this is something that is really not necessary. Once you paraphrase, you can also use like synonyms for certain words, and you just need to make sure that you credit the original author of that information. So whatever the source was that you used, you have to make sure that you credit the person. The next mistake that I have here is do not overcommit to side projects. Sometimes we take on too much that we just cannot handle, right? If you do in your paper, your dissertation or your thesis paper, you should have a timeline in terms of when you hope to finish and what you want to accomplish each step of the way, right? So from writing your proposal, getting that approved, to actually starting your research, and then sometimes you may have to actually present different sections of your study as you progress in the process. So you want to make sure that you have a schedule for how you want to progress with your study, and you have to make sure that you stick to that schedule. So do not take on too many projects that you know that you will not be able to handle while you're doing your study, right? And while you're writing your paper, you have to make sure that you stay focused and that you stick to your schedule. The next mistake that people commonly make is ignore a writing schedule. I just spoke about this, right? But sometimes you do not make a schedule. And I think that that's a big mistake that students often make. They start writing their paper, they have completed their study, or they're in the middle of their study, and they start writing their paper, and they do not have a schedule in place. It is important that you have a schedule so that you can stay on track. I know people who would take 11, 12, 13, 15, 20 years even to actually complete their PhD here in the United States, where I live. And so a lot of times we get so sidetracked because life happens, right? We have our work to do, we have families to take care of. And so oftentimes we get sidetracked. If you have a schedule in place, that will help you to stay focused, and that will help you to stay on track with your target of when you want to finish writing your paper, so you can get it out of the way and that you can earn that well-deserved degree. The next mistake that people often make is they forget to proofread their work. A lot of times they may actually try to proofread it, but if you're looking at the same paper over and over again, you've been writing this paper for months. Sometimes it takes even more than a year, right, to write your dissertation paper. So if you've been writing this paper, you're seeing the information over and over again, there are things that you will miss. Trust me on this. You will miss certain things. So it is very important that you do not forget to ask someone else to proofread your work. Don't rely on yourself to proofread, because there are errors that you will definitely miss. So ask someone to proofread. There are many proofreading services that you can take advantage of. And if you just Google, proofreading services for it, you will find people who are willing to do it for you. And you can also even contact me if you need my assistance with that. But do not forget to ask someone else to proofread your work. If you feel the need to proofread your work, by yourself, then I recommend that you put aside your paper for a few days. When you're writing your paper, just don't look at it for maybe 2, 3 days or even a week, as long as 7 days before you look at it, and then you read through the entire thing again, and then you will be more likely to catch any mistakes, any errors that you have made in the paper, so that you can make those corrections. But if you're looking at it today, you're writing the paper, and then tomorrow you try to proofread it, there are mistakes that you definitely will not catch. So do not make that mistake. Proofreading is very, very important, and there are too many services available for you not to get your work proofread by someone else. The next mistake that people often make is they're overly ambitious. So they try to cover too much when they are writing their paper. So in my last video, I spoke about having a vague topic, a topic that is too vague, that is not specific enough, it's too general. It is very important that you are as specific as possible, because then you'll also be able to cover more gaps that need to be covered in that particular area of your paper. So I advise you to be as specific as possible. Again, do not try to cover too much in your paper. Do not try to go all out, okay? You are not trying to solve all the issues that are related to that topic in your research. That is not what this is about. You want to be as specific as possible, and you want to stay focused so that you can actually be comprehensive with that specific part of the topic that you're covering, right? So you want to make sure that you have a specific topic, and that you make sure that you're detailed, and that you can cover the gaps that are related to that part of the broader topic. That, as I mentioned, for me, I did mine on hypertension, my dissertation study, and so I had to be very specific. I chose to do it on hypertension in African Americans, and I chose to look at certain areas, so their beliefs, their knowledge, their attitudes and behaviors regarding the use of home remedies to treat high blood pressure. So I was very specific, I was very intentional, and I made sure that I was able to actually cover the gaps that are in the research, that I found in the research, that are related to that specific topic. So you want to make sure that you're intentional about your topic, and not try to get too much done. The next mistake is that people neglect their mental and their physical health. This is another important one. If you are not well physically, so if you're not taking care of your well-being, you will not be able to actually do a good job writing your paper. That's the bottom line. You have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You have to make sure that self-care is involved somewhere along the line. Sometimes people see therapists. I know many students who choose to see a therapist while they're actually conducting their dissertation study and they're writing their papers, because it is so overwhelming. It's a lot to deal with, and a lot of us still have a full-time job while we're doing our research studies. Some of us have children, we have husbands, we have wives, we have our families to take care of, right? And we have our work to consider. So if you're doing all of that, plus you're doing this very challenging study that is very detailed, a very time-consuming process, right? So you want to make sure that you are physically and mentally healthy while you are writing your paper. So the next mistake is that people often make is that they avoid getting feedback. So again, I mentioned getting a proofreader to actually proofread your work. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is professional, by the way. It can be a friend, it can be someone who you're doing the PhD program with, right? It can be your sibling, for instance. So it is, but you should get some sort of feedback. Oftentimes, your supervisor and your other committee members will give you feedback. You should make sure that you take that feedback, and that you actually, whatever makes sense to you, you should definitely implement those changes in your paper. Again, I mentioned in my last video that you do not necessarily have to make all the changes that are recommended by your committee chair or by your other committee members. But it's very important that you do have a good argument for why you do not agree or why you don't want to make those necessary those changes that they think are necessary. You want to make sure that you have a good argument why not, right? And if it's feedback that makes sense to you, do not be bullheaded, right? So do not be stubborn about it and say, oh, I am not going to change anything. It is very important that you make the necessary changes if you see where they make sense. But get feedback. It is very important, and trust me, it will make your paper much better at the end of the day, and much less likely that you will have to make any corrections as well to your paper after you do your dissertation defense. The next mistake that students often make when they're writing their dissertation is that they disregard data management. You have to make sure that you're able to manage your data very efficiently, right? You want to make sure that you are not getting too much data that you will not be able to put in your paper. You want to be intentional with your literature review. You want to just focus on the areas or the different articles that are related to your specific topic. Do not go overboard with the whole data and you're just gathering everything from everywhere you can find it, right? You don't want to have just one source, right? You want to make sure that you do have more than one source, but at the same time, it's very important that you ensure that you're not getting too much data that is going to overwhelm you, that you're not going to use in your paper anyway. So you want to make sure, like, you have once you start your literature review, you should start seeing where the gaps are, and then you focus on closing those gaps. So you focus on the articles that will help you to close those gaps, right? A lot of times you can just read the abstract of an article. Before you even read the entire article, you can read just the abstract and you can get so much information. You will know right off the bat whether or not that article will help you and help you to give you the necessary information that you need, or have relevant information to your study. The next mistake is people often fail to back up their work, right? So a lot of times, I don't know, for those of you who are old enough, you may remember the days of whether CDs, or you may remember the days of having thumb drives. I think a lot of people still use the USB. Thumb drives also called USB drive. A lot of people still use that, I believe. But there are so many different ways that you can back up your work, right? So if you're writing your paper in Word, or if you're writing it as a Google Doc, a document, you want to make sure that you save your work, right? And I recommend that you save your work on a USB drive, and that you save your work on your computer. And every time you update your paper, so every time you write a little more of your paper, email it to yourself. It is very important that you have a lot of different backup sources, right? If you don't back up your work, you can easily lose it. So if you have it just on a USB drive, for instance, that drive can stop working suddenly. I've had many drives stop working on me suddenly. I didn't drop them. Nothing happened, right? They weren't exposed to the sun or anything like that, and they just stopped working. So it's very important that, and those two, of course, you can just lose them as well, right? You can just misplace them. But so it's very important that you do email your work, any updates to your paper. You want to email that new version to yourself. You want to make sure that you save your work on your computer, and you want to make sure that you also have your work saved on a USB drive. That is my recommendation, to ensure that you do not lose your work, and that you don't have to redo anything. It's enough for us to do, right? This is a very stressful process. It's a lot that we have to write. You want to make sure that your work is properly backed up, so you don't lose any of your data, anything that you have already written. The next mistake is people often overlook the ethical considerations. So I think I touched on this last time as well in my previous video, but ethical considerations is so important, right? So you will need to get your proposal approved by their institutional review board. So each university has an institutional review board, and some people also want to get participants from like a hospital, for instance, right? So they may be doing something on cleaning chemicals that are used in hospitals. So they may have hospital workers, that's their target audience, and that's their target population, so those are the individuals that they want to recruit, right, to participate in their study. Now, if that is the case, oftentimes hospitals, and this is just an example, but oftentimes hospitals, they also have their own institutional review board, and you'll be required to also get approval for your study by that institutional review board, because the hospital would have to give you the okay, the go ahead for you to recruit their employees. So you want to make sure that you are aware of all of those. You need to do the necessary research, right? And you need to make sure that you are well informed, that you get all the necessary approvals that are necessary for you to actually conduct your research and get the study participants that you need to actually get accurate data for your study. The next mistake is people sometimes write in isolation. Guys, this is not a good thing, right? This is one mistake that people often make as well. And to be honest, I wrote my paper in isolation because I feel like I didn't really have much choice, because I wrote my paper, most of my paper I wrote during COVID. But you do not have to write your paper in isolation. That is not a good thing, because when you do that, you feel so alone, and it is much more difficult for you to actually get your paper done. When you are writing in groups, it is much easier because you have accountability partners per se, right? So you'll have someone to count on, to lean on, to keep you on track, right? And you'll also be able to do that for that person who you're writing with as well. So make sure that you do not write in isolation. This can be a lonely process, guys. So make sure that you have an accountability partner, and that you have someone, preferably a group of other students, who you can actually work together with when you're writing your paper. The next mistake is to mismanage your time. It's very important that you manage your time effectively. Again, we spoke about like data management and getting too much data, right? So that you really just can't even manage. You have things all over the place. You have some saved on your computer, and some saved in a document, some saved on the desktop, and you have things all over the place. We don't want that to happen. Just like you want to make sure that you manage your time. And when you manage your time, you'll also be able to actually focus on your schedule and keep on track of your schedule, and make sure that you get your work done on time, right? Follow that schedule. Make sure that you are keeping abreast of the time, keeping track of the time, and that you are, if you intended to write twice per week or 3 times per week, that you stick to that schedule. And even if you don't write, if you plan to write 1 hour, right, 3 times per week for a total of 3 hours per week, and you're not able, one of those hours, one day, you're not able to write for the entire 1 hour because you have something else going on, it is okay for you to just go ahead and write for half an hour instead, right? But try to get some work in when you have scheduled on your calendar to actually work on your paper. You don't want to lose too much time with that, because you can easily get sidetracked, and you can easily completely miss the deadline that you had set for yourself to actually complete your paper. The next mistake is people often use inconsistent citation styles. You have to make sure that you're aware of what citation style is required by your university, by your program. It's often not just the university, but it's by your specific department, right? Because of course, based on the actual your major, you will have universities will you oftentimes use different citation style. You have to make sure that you are aware of the citation style that is required for you, that your department at your university requires you to actually write your paper in, and you have to stick to that. Do not use MLA and then you're using APA and then you're using AMA, right? Or the Chicago stuff. You have to make sure that you stick to the citation style that you're required to use, that your department requires you to use, and then you make sure that you're well aware of that. You can go to Purdue OWL. I always recommend Purdue OWL because it's usually up to date, right? And you can actually very easily be able to know exactly how I should cite a source in the body of your study, and how I should write the references, right? So your reference list, how those should be written, and it's based on what to write. If it's how you should do, you should reference articles versus how you should refer like articles online that's published in a journal versus something that is that you found in a newspaper, for instance, right? So it's very important that you're aware of the citation style that is required, and that you stick with it, and that you make sure that you check again sources like Purdue OWL to ensure that you're writing everything correctly, and that you're making sure that all the sources are also cited. The next mistake is ignoring the thesis statement, okay? So you have a thesis statement, you know what that problem is, right? So it's called a problem statement. You make sure that you stick with it, and that you ensure that you're answering that problem. You're trying to fix that thing, right? So it's okay, what is the issue that I'm going to address here? Make sure that you do address that issue. The other mistake is people sometimes overly depend on a single source of data. You cannot do that, okay? This is a dissertation paper. This is a comprehensive paper. This is something that is showing the world, really, right? Not just your department at your university or your committee members, but you're showing the world that, okay, you know what? I am worthy of getting this degree, right? I have put in the work, I've put in the effort, and I deserve to have a PhD. You have to make sure that your sources are diverse. Do not use, you don't want to cite one source 10, 12, 14, 16 times in your paper. You want to make sure that, and you can cite a source more than once. That is not what I'm saying at all, but don't overdo it, okay? You want to make sure that your study is diverse, that you're looking at many different sources for online for information, for data that you need when you're doing your literature review. And you can definitely find a lot of different articles and that are relevant to your topic. Believe me, there's so many research that have been done on all different areas, right? So of that you can possibly do, anything that you can possibly do, or topics that you can possibly do research on, you will be able to find many different sources. So make sure that you do spend a lot of time doing your literature review so that you can get as many sources as possible, that your data source, right, is very diverse, and that you're able to cite many different sources throughout your dissertation or thesis paper. The next mistake is students sometimes neglect to define the key terms. That is a no-no. That is a no-no, guys. It's important that you define your key terms. So based on the topic of your paper, there are certain key terms that will be required for you to define. Usually the definition of the key terms, you write the key terms after your abstract. So after you write those key terms, you know that, okay, these are some terms that I need to define. You will have to define those in your paper. And even if there are usually a restriction, right, or a limit to how many key terms that you can indicate after your abstract. So that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only key terms that you will need to define in your paper. So you have to make sure that you're aware of what you need to define, or what the key terms are based on the topic of your paper, and you want to make sure that you define all of those key terms. Okay, the key terms are usually defined in the introduction of your paper, so that in that chapter, in the introduction chapter, you will have a section for definition of key terms, and that is where your key terms should be defined. All right, so the next mistake is students sometimes avoid the difficult sections of your dissertation. You have to spend time on the difficult sections. Those are the sections and stuff that are usually where most of the work, right? You need to put in most of your work. So you cannot avoid those sections, because those sections are way too important for you to avoid. You have to make sure that you spend the time on the ones that are less difficult, and it's okay to do those sections first, to do the ones that are easier for you first. I always recommend that people start with the literature review. That's the first chapter. I always recommend students, people ask me for advice all the time on this, and I always tell them, start with your literature review. That is the chapter that you should start with. So it's literature review, methodology, and then you go back to chapter 1, which is your introduction. The reason for this is that the literature review is what a lot of students tend to be afraid of. They try to stay away from the literature review, but that's the meat of your dissertation. You cannot do a paper, really cannot start your paper without doing your literature review, because number one, you have to know where are their gaps, right? So that are related to your topic. Where are there gaps in the research, and because those are the gaps that you will try to fill in, right, when you are doing your study. So you need to know what are the gaps. So I know that the literature review chapter 2 of your dissertation, that's the chapter that a lot of people try to stay away from. They don't want to do it. This is too much. It's too overwhelming. I don't know where to start. Start somewhere. Just start writing. When you start writing, things will fall into place, trust me, and it will start making sense to you. But you have to get started. So make sure that you focus on the difficult sections of your dissertation. It will be okay. You just have to focus on those. You have to get them done. And so might as well you just start writing. But again, they are really very important to your study, and to your paper, there's no way that you can really write a good paper by doing a lackluster, by being lackluster when it comes to those sections of your dissertation. So you make sure that you put in the work, you just stay focused, you set aside time when you're going to focus on doing those sections of your dissertation, right? So more than likely they will need more time than the easier chapters. That's the chapters are considered easier, quote unquote, right? Such as your conclusion chapter. So you want to make sure though that you spend a lot of time focusing on those areas or those sections of your dissertation that you find most challenging, because again, they're very important. The next mistake that people often make is that they write without reviewing the literature. I just spoke about this, about how important it is for you to make sure that you do a thorough literature review, and that you get your information, your data from many different sources, so that you can write a comprehensive paper and that you will be able to close the gaps in the research that are related to your topic. Very, very important, guys. Okay, the next mistake is students sometimes forget to address the counter arguments. Okay, so there are arguments for and there are arguments against, right? You have to make sure that in your literature review, you talk about the arguments. So you're going to talk about your knowns. What are the knowns? What are the gaps that you found, right? You're going to talk about what are the gaps that you are going to try to close in your study. By conducting your study, what are the gaps that you are going to try to close? When you talk about that, you also have to talk about what are the arguments against against your topic, right? So if you're going to talk about again, I'm going to talk about my dissertation study, which was the African Americans' use of home remedies to treat high blood pressure. if you're talking about that, right, you want to talk about the counter argument regarding the use of conventional medicine to actually treat high blood pressure. What are the benefits of using of conventional medicine? How will what are like the benefits, as well as you also want to talk about what are the risks of using home remedies. So you have to make sure that you focus and address the counter arguments as well. The next mistake is ignoring formatting rules. So you do not want to ignore the rules of how you should format your dissertation paper. There are definitely rules that are required based on, a lot of times, these are based on the citation style that you're using, and your university or your department will have certain formatting rules as well. You have to make sure that you're aware of those rules, and you have to make sure that you abide by those rules as you write your paper. The next mistake is students often fail to discuss the implications. So the implications of your research. What are the implications? What do these results mean, right? How will these results affect the study or the topic moving forward? Because now you're bringing new data to the research, right? To the research that has been done on your particular topic. What are the implications of that data? Right, of what you were able to uncover, of your results. You have to make sure that you discuss the implications of your research. The other mistake that students often make is that they overload their paper with jargons. It is not necessary for you to do that. You want to make sure that your paper I recommend anywhere from a 6th to an 8th grade reading level. No one who is not able to understand anything above the 8th grade reading level, right, should have to figure out, okay, what do they mean by this word? What do they mean by this term? Your work, you make sure that you will use simple language, that it is not overly complicated, that you're not using too many technical terms throughout your paper, but you're definitely breaking it down and into simple, easily understood word, layman terms, if you will, right? Make sure that your paper you use as much layman terms in your paper, throughout your paper as possible, so that anyone can easily read your paper when you're finished with your dissertation and you have published your work. You're able to make sure that people can read it, anyone can read it, can pick up a journal, and they can go online and read your article, and they can understand what you're talking about. They don't have to go to a dictionary to say, okay, what is this technical term? What does this mean? You want to make sure that you do not overload your paper with jargons. The next mistake that people often make is that they rush the conclusion. That is not necessary either, okay? You want to take your time to focus. So you want to make sure that the conclusion, number one, make sure that you're not introducing any new detail in your conclusion, right? So that is why you have a discussion chapter. That is why you have your results chapter. You want to make sure that for your conclusion, you are summarizing everything that you have already spoken about, right? You want to make sure that this is a summary. What are the implications of your study, right? What's the significance of your study? What does this result mean, right? What will it mean for this topic, right? Now that you have uncovered this extra information, you have contributed to the topic now, right? And your results are out there for the world to see. You want to make sure that you're including everything, that you do a detailed summary in your conclusion, right? And your conclusion also has different sections you want to focus on. And I will be doing another video where we'll break down the different chapters of the dissertation study, or of your dissertation paper. What are the different chapters, the 6 chapters that you need to cover, and what should be included in each chapter with detailed information. So watch out, guys, for that particular video that I will be doing. So you want to make sure that you don't rush your conclusion, and that you you're detailed, you summarize everything very well. And you include all the different sections as well that you need to include in your conclusion chapter. The other mistake that students often make is that they underestimate the revision process. So that you have to make sure that you set aside time, right? So maybe it's a few months where you're going to have to make some revisions. And this is, I'm talking about both the before and after your dissertation defense. So you want to make sure that you revise things as necessary before your dissertation defense. You want to update certain things because there are certain times when it may be, you may actually have, okay, let me go back here. Okay, you want to make sure that there are certain times when you know the literature as like is outdated. There are new data or new articles that have come out on your topic, and that you probably want to cite in your study, and so you want to make sure that you update as necessary. But you also will have to make revisions after your dissertation defense. In many cases, not necessarily most, but in many cases, the revision will be necessary, where you, based on the questions that you're asked, based on recommendation from your dissertation committee members, you may have to make revisions. And so you want to make sure that for those revisions that you actually take your time and do a good job, so that they don't have to say you have to revise this again, or this was requested for you to do and you did not do it. You want to make sure that you do all the different revisions, all the revisions that they ask that you do. All right, guys, these are the mistakes, the remaining mistakes that I promised you that I would share with you that students often make. Please don't be one of those students. If you are currently doing your master's, or you're currently doing your PhD and you're in the thesis or dissertation phase of your program, make sure that you do not make these mistakes. Making these mistakes will just cost you time, it will cost you effort, it will cost you money, because these are very expensive programs, right, that we have to pay for. So you want to make sure that you avoid these mistakes, so that you can be as efficient as possible, and that you can have a well-written, comprehensive, very high quality paper when all is said and done. Okay, guys, I am going to link the first video on the mistakes, where I cover the top 6 mistakes that students often make when they're writing their thesis or dissertation papers. So I will link that, so please check out that video next. And please remember to like this video, please subscribe to my channel, please comment, let me know if any of these mistakes, you have made any of these mistakes, or what mistakes and so you think you would have made if I hadn't made this video. Okay, please comment and let me know what those mistakes are that you will avoid, you'll be able to avoid thanks to this video. And make sure, guys, that you hit that notification bell, so that you are made aware of every new video that I upload. All right, guys, thanks for watching. You take care. Bye for now.